Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. Let's talk about what happened last week, something that we just seem to take for granted. We like to say process is a punishment. What that means is that we are so tolerant of a system where we can be wrongfully arrested, have our reputation tattered, no case against us, and we just shrug and say process is a punishment. Well, look at what happened last week. On 28th February, TV Mohandas Pai, a well known angel investor, tagged Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in a post on social media, X, drawing attention to what seems to be a case of enforcement overreach. This was the arrest of Rishi Gupta, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Feno Payments Bank Limited. He was arrested over evasion of goods and service tax. Now, in a rare response to Mr. Pai's post, the FM posted, "Thanks for sharing, we'll check." We wrote about this, the entire media wrote about it. It became a news story. Now, for the record, Fino Payments Bank has clarified, and this was also part of Mr. Pai's post, that the GST issue pertains to a business partner over whom the bank has no operational control. Also, despite the FM's assurance, which was, remember, 28th February, Mr. Gupta had been arrested on 27th, and as I'm recording this, it's 4th March, he remains under arrest. This incident naturally triggered a debate about enforcement abuse by investigation agencies, where individuals get arrested based on alleged infractions with minimal evidentiary basis. And it's not Mr. Gupta alone. That same week, we had this other huge, explosive judgment of the Delhi court, which discharged all 23 accused in the much publicized Delhi excise policy case, which cost the Aam Aadmi Party an election. Surely it cost, I'm sticking my neck out and saying it did cost them an election. This was, remember, no ordinary matter because the top 5 elected leaders of the Aam Aadmi Party had been arrested. Cumulatively, they spent almost 7 years in jail. And now the judge has said that they have been discharged because the CBI has not even made a case worth framing charges. Right? And who was arrested? Not anybody at all. A sitting chief minister. He spent 5 months in jail. A sitting deputy chief minister spent over 17 months in jail. 2 other ministers. And everybody just watched because we are waiting for the legal system to work, maybe even to grant bail. There were sad stories about how many times Mr. Manish Sisodia, the Deputy Chief Minister, had been denied bail. Now, Justice Jitendra Singh of the Roos Avenue Court stated there was no overarching conspiracy or criminal intent behind the excise policy. He also criticized the CBI for relying on conjecture rather than solid evidence and described the probe as a choreographed exercise that failed to meet judicial scrutiny. I'm sure all of you have read it, but if not, we have written articles. Here's a link. You can take a look at it. The CBI predictably rushed to file an appeal. But here, let's go back to the questions that Mr. Pai asked the FM when he asked for intervention in the other case. 1. How can the CEO of a regulated bank be arrested on an issue that has to do with his business partner? Is this not overreach? Second, the Finance Ministry has conferred vast enforcement powers under the GST regime. What safeguards do citizens have against misuse of power? Now, the Delhi judgment reveals a wider troubling question. If an elected CM, Deputy CM, and other ministers can be arrested on such flimsy charges that they're discharged only after a lengthy jail term, how much worse is it for ordinary citizens whose arrest is not even going to trigger a public outcry? People are only just going to look down on you and consider that you are a thief or a criminal or whatever it is that you've been charged with. Now, the timing of these developments is very ironic. Remember, it's not 2 big cases that we're talking about. We are talking about a multitude of things. On the very same day that Mr. Pai posted his appeal to the FM, the Chief Justice of India observed that the Supreme Court has at times issued sweeping orders in the names of protecting fundamental rights, which in reality disturb the social fabric. True, it goes back to the court as well, right? Now, let's not stop here. This judicial reflection is a kind of acknowledgement of a systemic problem, some to do with the judiciary, but others to do with investigation and issues that extend far beyond what this was about sweeping orders. At this point of time, the Supreme Court, again, let's talk about the apex court because things wind their way to the apex court over a period of time. So, the Supreme Court is doing a suo motu hearing on the widespread issue of digital fraud. It is outraged, it's angry, and it has repeatedly lashed out at banks for failing to protect customers through swift responses to unusual fund transfer, which is what people do when they are under so called digital arrest. They're sitting in front of a computer and they're doing as they're told, which is transferring all their savings to these fraudsters. The Supreme Court has even gone so far as to say that banks are becoming a liability. But the court seems to have overlooked a fundamental reality, which is the real barrier to financial safety is public fear. Ordinary citizens fall for digital fraud when somebody across on a camera sounds and talks like a police officer or a CBI officer or what they imagine to be a CBI and enforcement officer, talking tough, talking abusive, a fake police station or whatever behind him, sometimes a Supreme Court room showing fake orders. Why are they so scared? Not because they're guilty, but because they fear they could be harassed, victimized, arrested, and extorted by government agencies regardless of their guilt. The deeper fear is that justice is a distant dream. If that happens, it's not that you can go to court, you can fight it out. You will be facing some kind of digital insolvency because your accounts may be frozen and you may not even have the resources. First of all, nobody believes you're innocent because you've been arrested, and you may not even have your own money because it's frozen. And justice moves at a glacial pace in India. There are 54 million pending cases across the judiciary at all levels, so much so that the process itself becomes a punishment. And this is especially hard if you're innocent and wrongly accused. So when somebody says, I'll fix it for you, I will ensure you're not harassed, people are willing to transfer their entire savings to these so called investigation agencies who are now fraudsters. The judges are hearing this, they're justifiably angry, but they need to go to the root cause of why people are so scared, which is the justice system moving slowly and false allegations. Now, again, this is not the only one. In another far-reaching order, Radhika Agarwal versus Union of India, not very long ago, February 2025, the Supreme Court bunched together 100-odd petitions which were all about arbitrary arrest, coercion to declare taxes, misuse of power by investigation agencies, and using the threat of arrest as a tax recovery tool. Another hard-hitting order. Okay, 100 cases have been decided. All are about overreach. The court ruled that although tax officers do possess the power to arrest, they cannot exercise them without robust constitutional safeguards, which means arrests have to be justified, they have to be based on credible evidence, they have to be explained to the arrested person, and due process has to be followed. In fact, the court explicitly said that the arrest cannot serve as a tool for revenue recovery. Now, the number of cases heard under this Radhika Agarwal order itself establishes a systemic pattern of enforcement misuse. But this order is also not unique. Again, we're talking about 2025 alone. Another case, Krishnaswamy Vijay Kumar versus Deputy Director of Income Tax. The Supreme Court imposed 2 lakh rupees as costs on the Income Tax Department, and it was to be paid as compensation to this person for pursuing criminal prosecution for alleged tax evasion despite lacking the essential element of willful concealment and gross non-compliance. All this has its own binding procedures which income tax ignored to go after this man. So 2 lakhs, rare case. All this, remember, has happened before the bank case that Mr. Pai talks about. Doesn't end. Another one, parallel instance, with political overtones like Aam Aadmi Party. May 2025, not so long ago, the Supreme Court stayed an order in the high-profile Tamil Nadu State Marketing Corporation case, again to do with liquor. The Enforcement Directorate had accused the state-owned corporation of Tamil Nadu of financial irregularity and money laundering, treated the organization as a criminal, had extensive raids, and was carrying on. Now, when the case reached the Supreme Court, naturally, as a state body, it's easy for them to go to the Supreme Court, unlike ordinary people. The bench, led by then Chief Justice B.R. Gawai, reprimanded the ED, saying it was crossing all limits and threatening the federal balance by encroaching on state authority, because the state of Tamil Nadu was already conducting an investigation, but that didn't matter. The ED stepped in and went all forces. Despite these orders and precedents, you still have the MD of Feno Bank being arrested. And remember, now let's come to this bank. It's a tightly regulated entity. It's under the Reserve Bank of India. It has to do with the conduct of a business partner. Now, all banks, particularly the large ones, work with hundreds of partners and merchant establishments. Can such arrests be extended to the larger banks as well? If it happens, there will be chaos. Fino Bank was relatively small, the impact was less. If it happened to a large bank, suddenly the MD is arrested because of something that a partner has done without taking everyone into account. It could trigger a run on deposits, it could cause share prices to crash, it could affect investor confidence, and some of these systemic consequences could be permanent. You may not be able to reverse it as easily. In fact, in a closely regulated environment, can a single enforcement agency initiate action which has wider systemic implications without taking into account sectoral regulators? For instance, if it's a listed company, it's going to impact investors. Shouldn't they discuss it with the Securities and Exchange Board of India, or in this case, the Reserve Bank of India? If they do not know, can they just rush? Because arresting an MD and a CEO, I'm not defending him, has specific, very strong signals, right? It's a regulated entity. You're treating this person as a hardened criminal. It has a chilling effect on also our stated commitment to ease of doing business. Ease of doing business is not about slogans, it's not about what the FM says in parliament or in speeches. It's about what happens on the ground. What is it that people are scared of? What is it that businesses are scared of? In fact, in 2024-25, while all this is happening, there are these cases. The ED went even further and began to issue summons to senior advocates to question them on legal opinions that they had provided to their clients. It became so bad, and since again it's top lawyers, that it was taken up by the Supreme Court. Had they been asked questions and made to answer, it would have been a complete violation of client confidentiality. So, after repeated such summons to various lawyers, the Supreme Court intervened, and this led to the ED issuing a circular that requires director level approval for summoning any advocate. Believe me, this just contains the problem, it does not eliminate it. And this is really half an answer. So, these seemingly tough enforcement actions, again, may have had some justification if India's enforcement agencies had a 90-95% success rate. Instead, CBI loses 70 to 75% of its cases at the tribunal itself and 80 to 85% in high courts. Worse, it has often closed high profile investigations where there are raids, front page news, arrests, and suddenly they say there is nothing. Or sometimes there's a new political formation and something which is 25,000 crore, 10,000 crore is suddenly closed, saying there's nothing, there's no evidence. And all that they had done for years with all the media leaks, there's nothing there. This pattern of politically linked investigations, that's what it is not limited to this regime. It has been endemic across political eras in India, right? What has truly weaponized all of this is our failure to get justice and the judiciary's failure to award serious punitive damages to victims in politically motivated, extortive, or coercive investigations. I talked about a 2 lakh compensation. I don't even think it covers a fraction of the legal costs. What happens to Aam Aadmi Party? This will drag on for 30 years because there'll be appeal after appeal. What happens to the fact that they lost power? You know the cost of an election. Again, not making a case for them, but there is a court order. We've all grown accustomed to accepting that the process is the punishment even when a shocking 75% of the prison population in India comprises under trials. Some of them are there because they have no money to pay bail, and yet doesn't seem to move us anymore. The bigger tragedy is that real criminals, embezzlers, extortionists, organized crime syndicates, and our corrupt politicians navigate the same system beautifully and with ease, and their cases close, vanish, data vanishes, documents vanish whenever they like it. We can only change this by rebuilding the justice system and the enforcement system to ensure that arrest requires evidence, detention requires judicial oversight, justice arrives in a meaningful time frame, and judges are also made accountable for delays, and the victims are compensated. If you agree, please share this because it's all of us. You can be the victim. Don't think anybody is safe. Thank you.